Welcome to an awesome edition of Rebellion's educational series. We have a cybersecurity legend with us, a man who started the division at the Navy that in fact inspired the TV show CSI. He founded Microsoft's first ever cybersecurity unit. Bryan Hurd, such an honor to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Appreciate it.
Pleasure's all here. Pleasure's on our side. So let's jump right into World War II. You know, that would, in your opinion, would that be the birthplace of cybersecurity in the military warfare?
Interesting question. I think a lot of the core foundations go back even further. I mean, if you're everybody who's been forced to read Sun Tzu, Clausewitz did a great adjustment.
Of course, yeah.
Using military.
Absolutely, I love Clausewitz.
Exactly. So I think the evolution of information operations, which has turned into influence operations or cyber operations, has been laid for thousands of years. I think we saw more of the electronic components.
Well, Bryan, may I cut you off? Was there any cybersecurity in World War I really specifically, or can you not comment on World War I?
Well, the cutting of the telegraph lines, things like that, the insertion of agents behind the scenes, or the insertion of stories in newspapers. So it depends on how much of cyber operations or information operations.
No, those are great points, all of which are valid.
Yeah, the cut, but you know,
I don't know about the. Can you talk about the cutting of the telegram lines, please, Bryan? I don't know anything about that. I've never heard that before.
Just even in the trench warfare, you know, telegraph lines or other things that you're trying to communicate back to headquarters to get orders about what to do. Anything to make the adversary's communications slower. You know, shooting the pigeons, if you want to look at that as your cyber of the time.
You know,
those kind of things. Anything to stop the communication channel. It was just lower tech at the time.
And then jumping to Enigma, did the U.S. have any comparable work that UK was doing with Alan Turing?
The U.S. had, and the Spy Museum in D.C. Has a lot of great overview of not only Enigma, but the code breaking around it, both on the UK side, which is very well written about, and then the US side. And there was a lot of code work done by, I believe it was Grace Hopper and a bunch of the others here, and Hedy Lamarr, very unknown code breaker, and some others that were founding parents of the Navy's program. So yeah,
Hedy Lamarr is absolutely a legend. But specifically, we wrote a Rebellion research on the Bismarck maybe 90 days ago. And in it, we really mentioned the fact that Turing's work with Enigma was a major part of taking down the Bismarck. And that's not, that's not really a readily known fact.
Yeah, that was the one thing, and even so many years later, such massive success in war still holds not only a mystique, but an importance in not revealing tradecraft. So I think some of the things, as you get to the 25, 50, and 75 year declassification marks, you'll learn a lot more about what you thought about previous battles.
Oh, really? Can you tell us something that has surprised you greatly the last few years in your studies?
I think some of the things, and I worked the Moonlight Maze case back in 20 years ago, of where the Russians were coming in and stealing a bunch of our stuff, and some of that's coming to light now 25 years later.
When you say Moonlight Maze, I guess you're referring to the space program and our intelligence being taken by the Russians?
Yes. I led the nation's investigation for Moonlight Maze and ended up writing the final national report. So I led the Navy's investigation, then ultimately the DoD's, and then helped the FBI write the report.
And how much would you say of the Russian space program was based on of stolen information? 5%, 20%, 50, 70?
I don't know a percentage, because I don't track the implementation of stolen materials as a counter.
Sorry, no, it's a very vague question. I apologize.
No, it's a perfectly valid question. I think it impacted and augmented or facilitated their space program, their aeronautics program, their counter weapons programs, probably even their submariner and other issues. But again, as a counter-espionage agent, I'm trying to stop from being stolen. How it's being implemented, if we're seeing it on the battlefield, is a different unit.
Well, speaking of present day, do you know about the United Airlines flight that supposedly 5 years ago, the Washington Post reported was hacked and apparently banked left and then banked right? Do you know about this instance?
I've heard about it. I've done a lot of pen testing around aircraft and separation of systems and stuff. I always take those with a grain of salt, um, because of various issues we've seen in aeronautics, issues in computer control, even when a hacker or other is not involved. So a lot of times what we're seeing in the press, having been on both sides of press stories, in my career, what the press gets access to and reports as they believe to be accurate may not be the fulsome truth, through no fault of their own.
No, definitely possible. We had the hacker actually on the show this summer, the alleged hacker. He would not comment, and we would not bring that issue up, of course, far too delicate for him. And so, there's no way to know whether it was reality or not. But something that specific hacker said on our show was that anything is hackable, from your cell phone to your Tesla. And if that's the case, and we certainly see that China's new stealth fighter seems to be a mirror image of our own, what can we really safeguard anymore at this point?
Well, and I do agree. Everything that's designed by an IT group, is hackable. But then the question is, how much time, energy, manpower, and knowledge does the adversary have to do so? And what's it worth to them to do so? So I think cybersecurity, I've been a proponent of it for, over 30 years now, is absolutely something that needs to be engineered in from the start. Although the way we do innovation and get products to market, it's usually an aftermarket product. So that's a concern. And I work with a lot of automakers, real estate, medical, so forth and so on. We have to get better, because the adversary, and one quick soundbite, the adversary is not a kid in a hoodie. We need to get that picture out of our community. It is an ecosystem of evil. It is a continent, trillion-dollar industry dedicated to stealing money and intellectual property from us, be it the Chinese, the Russians, organized crime, or whatever. And those are the things we need to be thinking of. This is not a mano a mano, old school, one hacker versus another, or one smart kid becomes the CEO.
Do you think one Bitcoin is safer than $1, or can you not comment on such a question?
Say again?
Do you think one Bitcoin is safer than $1?
Without FDIC and other protections for people around their Bitcoin wallets, or regulation around it, it's too easy to lose your entire fortune and have no recourse. Cryptocurrencies will at some point come into the mainstream, because in New York and in the region that you're in, many of the banks are now starting to accept it as a currency, but they're also wrapping around the account protections, know your customer, anti-money laundering, that would be required for a currency to be legitimate on the main stage.
I see. So reverting back to corporations, do you think that there's going to be any slowdown in cybersecurity spending, or is this one kind of division of the corporate, expense report that's just going to be continually growing?
I think it's one of the areas that some people started to cut back on during the pandemic, and rightfully so. I mean, at a certain point, you have to make horrible decisions about cost gain and where to spend money during, any business environment, but especially during a downturn or constriction. I do think it will increase. However, I'm hoping, as opposed to being its own line item, it will feed into the normal engineering and normal core engineering of businesses. I do a lot of mergers and acquisitions due diligence. We're seeing a lot more of that, finding material things in a deal. We're finding that, some companies are starting to ask those questions earlier in the, not only in the M&A cycle, but the P&E cycle, or doing things across their whole portfolio. I run initiatives to help a portfolio assess all of its 100 companies or things like that. So I think we're seeing it become more of the corporate governance and less of this mysterious white-coated cyber thing. And that's where the costs will increase, but I think they'll be blended in appropriately to where they should be.
Okay, interesting to hear. So would you say Microsoft is more secure than the US government? Or would you say it varies by the division? And then if so, would you say, for instance, the CIA or the FBI, would you say that they're more secure than Microsoft?
So having worked for all of the above and not wanting to anger any of the below, I would say that Microsoft and all the major corporations face nation state problems and are more open because of their culture, the way they're founded, the diversity of their employees, and the fact that, you know, compared to a TSSCI environment in the FBI or CIA, they're doing cursory background checks. But as we've seen with recent discussions around, you know, Chinese or Russian agents still operating every day in the United States, or the individual, the Russian individual trying to bribe a Tesla employee to insert a USB into the factory. Those kind of things still happen. I think the government, shockingly, has a head start on counterintelligence and counterespionage and insider threat operations. But I am seeing a lot of the world's major corporations appoint and develop insider threat programs, understanding that it's about, on their case, intellectual property. The billion-dollar company, as you know, in the Fortune 50, 100, it's, you look at it 100 years ago, it's all things. You look at it now, it's all ideas. It's all intellectual property. So I think they're going to have to protect that from external hacks and internal theft.
Great. Well, this is a fantastic show so far. If you're a student, maybe 20 years old, how would you recommend that they pursue a career in cybersecurity? What would you recommend they study?
I was keynoting at an Intel conference in Europe a couple of weeks ago, and they asked a kind of similar question, and it took me back to when I was 21, and was at NCIS, and then looked around when I wasn't doing terrorism 12 hours a day and said, what about this whole internet thing? And it was 1993 when I started, and 94 when I founded the program. The web didn't exist yet. I'm jealous of the 20-year-olds in the environment they're coming into. The problem they're going to face is there's too much noise and too much budget, as weird as that sounds. The corporations are spending enough and now expect some type of zero risk environment that doesn't exist. I think if you're going to be in cybersecurity, you need to understand holistically what it is. I mean, be the world's greatest pen tester, but be able to speak to a CEO. And the one thing I'll say about that, it's not dumbing it down, it's leveling it up. We have too long in our community said, well, I've got to dumb this down to talk to the board. No, the CEO of Brinks does not fix engines, nor should the CEO, male or female, ever do that. They shouldn't be thinking about the engine of one truck. They should be thinking about the operations of a global corporation day in and day out. You're leveling it up to walk in that boardroom. You're not trying to dumb it down to teach people how a firewall works. And if you ever find yourself trying to teach people in a boardroom how a firewall works, you're the one that's wrong.
No, great point. You know, you talked about the early 90s, and it reminds me of that famous espionage movie, Sneakers, with Robert Redford and Sidney Poitier. And there's, you know, they have that algorithm that can hack into any of the major, you know, whether it's the NTSB or the CIA or the FBI. And at the end of the movie, they hack into the Republican RNC and they take all their money. But, or they don't take it, they give it to all of these other causes that they deem worthy. But it's funny that, you know, such, you know, hacking ability hasn't really changed even with the internet. And that today, if you're a great hacker and you have great hacking code, you can get into such, you know, fantastic enterprises.
Well, I think the thing, and again, back to that ecosystem of evil and that continent, what used to be one hacker and a couple of tools.
No, now you have North Korea, you have the Russian government, you have North Korean government, you have the Chinese government.
Well, you also have marketplaces where you can hire a botnet. You can hire a DDoS attack for $9 a day. You can rent a botnet and get 72% of the take because the people that run it for you get 28%. Like you can click your way to evil on you know, Alpha Bay or whatever, you know, whatever the new one is, Silk Road 12. I don't know how many we've taken down.
Yeah.
But you literally can buy and sell that capability now. And there are whole groups that don't hack. They just make the tools and sell them on marketplaces on the dark web.
It's amazing. I mean, you know, that movie Sneakers really, in a very simplistic way, was foretelling the ability to buy and sell weapons for, you know, for perpetrating evil and, you know, hacking. So I just, it's
If you
really,
want two other movies, so old school movies from the 90s, Sneakers, Hackers, and Sandra Bullock's The Net.
yes,
And
the Net's rather a decent movie. Scary, but why couldn't a government come in and start erasing someone? So of
And
course.
we've had, in fact, I just worked with a CEO that had a hacker take over their Gmail account, and they have a G Suite at work, then basically called the phone company, ported their phone over, and then took over their Facebook, Instagram, and E-Trade accounts based on the two-factor SMS auth, and started basically taking over major parts of their identity. It happens every day.
Yeah,
And I have programs where I help executives with that, but that's not the topic for today. But there are defenses and ways to do it, but that still occurs every single day.
No, it definitely does. If anything, your only real resolution is maybe just to avoid said online platforms. So, Bryan, this has been absolutely awesome conversation. I wish we had more time for World War II and discussing your founding of the NCIS, but that'll have to be for another time. You're just a wealth of information.
In my defense, I only founded their cyber counterintelligence program. A lot of great federal agents and officers founded the rest of it.
Sorry, I apologize. Yes, I should have been more specific.
No, we're good.
Yeah, no, but I know you're great. Anyway, be well and stay safe, Bryan. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the time today, and I appreciate the time of you and your audience. Have a great day, everyone.
My pleasure.